Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my students. I welcome all of you to the first model of the third week lecture. In this week, we discuss the national differences in political economy, and along the way, all of you now have understood the concepts of globalization and the strategic management process that we deal with in terms of the principles of management and the rumination of the next generation contents. Before I go in, I have to tell you that you guys are really doing great in the pandemic situations of COVID-19. I hope you guys are all safe and healthy. And one of the things that I believe is that the whole purpose of this pandemic situation, and when we call this a quarantine time, is to keep as many of us safe and healthy as possible will be one of the priorities. So I want you guys to stay home and stay safe so that everything can return to normal as quickly as possible. And also, our studies and academic perseverance would be important, but also as much is your health and our situations to be controlled. So take good care of yourself and also each other so we maintain a safe distance of courses. And no matter what happens this year, I have to tell you that I am really proud of, my students with your resilience and your ability to adapt to extreme circumstances. Also, I have experiences for myself that I have studied in the United States, and I do understand how tough it is to quietly adapt to other situations, other countries, and it's related to our objectives of studies where we discuss national differences in political economy. So, to briefly state your learning objectives for this week is after this lecture, you will understand how the political systems of countries differ, and also our objectives are to understand how the economic systems and legal systems of countries can differ. These three pillars of political systems, economic systems, and legal systems would construct a main factor stream of national differences that really affect principles of management and all along the way the next generation contents issues. And after the lecture, you will have to be able to explain what determines the level of economic development of a nation, right? And discuss the macro political and economic changes taking place worldwide. So you see how it is related to the globalization issues and the decision-making processes of strategic rationale so that we understand better of our environment. And we also need to describe how transition economies are moving toward market-based systems. It is a prevailing phenomena that we need to understand. And if we have time, I would like to articulate the implications for management practice of national difference in political economy so that we better understand in an integrated view of globalization, strategic management process, and along the way, the national differences in political economy. Well, to begin with, I would like to generate a one big simple question, which is what is a political economy? I am pretty sure that most of my outstanding students are familiar with this concept. Every news media has an exposure of the political economy because it surrounds our standard of living in the international business ground. And when we think about international business, it is much more complicated than domestic business because, as I have told you in the beginning, countries differ in many ways. Countries have different political, economic, and legal systems, right? Cultural practices can vary dramatically, and as can the education and skill level of the population and countries that are at different stages of economic development. All these differences can and do have major implications for the practice of international business. And when we think about international business, I am letting you know that the concept is really close to the principles of management and the contents of next generation that we're ruminating throughout this course. So the linkage that you need to understand, they have a profound impact on the benefits, costs, and risks associated with doing business in different countries. To the point where you need to understand political economy in a theoretical term, right? The way in which operations in different countries should be managed and the strategy international firms should pursue in different countries. So, with that in mind, the introductory settings of theoretical rationale that I have given you would be is to define how countries' national differences occur in a political economy. Which of a nation refers to how the political, economic, and legal systems of a country are interdependent, right? It is a situation specific. So our strategies all differ, and our evaluations and our approaches in dealing with the principles of management, the products, the services, and the contents issues on the next generation would differ. We need to understand how they interact and influence each other along the way and how they affect the level of economic well-being in the nation. So collectively, as we refer to these systems as constituting the political economy of a country, our focus to these pillars of political economy, as I have reinforced the idea of political, economic, and legal systems, a macro view will be your specific focus to study along the way with what we have, you know, actually ran down into learning in the first and the second week. So students, as we go into the context of national differences in the political economy, we also have to think about a question related to what is a political system. The political system simply relates to a country shaping its economic and legal systems, right? And as such, we need to understand the nature of different political systems before discussing these economic and legal systems. When jotting down the principles of management, and also when we actually ruminate on the next generation contents, one of the key factors that we need to align with our logic along with the globalization and the strategic management process is the fundamentals of looking into how the national differences will affect on our products, services, and contents in which we're trying to create a value. So political system, as I have emphasized, is that the system of government in a nation would along the way differ, right, from your home countries to where you're studying right now, the South Korea would be very different. And these political systems can be assessed according to two dimensions, where I'm going to, along the way, explain further deeply regarding the degree to which they emphasize collectivism as opposed to the individualism. And the second degree would be whether it's democratic or totalitarian, right? And in addition to reviewing these kind of systems, the political system, we have to also explore how differences in political economy influence the benefits, costs, and risks associated with doing business in different countries. It's like dealing the products and services and contents in specific context of a nation where it's very different, and how they would affect the principles of management practices and strategy. So let's go in details in explaining the concepts that I have generated regarding the political system. And the first one to deal with is the collectivism. Think about collectivism, that refers to a political system underscoring the primacy of collective goals over an individual goals. When any societies or nation decides to emphasize its collectivism, the needs of society as a whole are generally viewed as being more important than individual freedoms. And in such circumstances, an individual's right to do something may be restricted on the grounds that it runs counter to the good of society or to the common good. And it can be stressed back to the Greek philosopher Plato. I'm pretty sure, many of my students are familiar with this name. And he has argued in his book, The Republic, that individual rights should be sacrificed for the good of the majority and that property should be owned in common, right? The state would be owned. And in modern times, we call that socialist tradition. They have picked up the collectivist mantle where, it equated with the socialist Karl Marx. And the elements the Marx has generated is closely related to collectivism, where when we think about the state-owned, the means of production, the state could ensure that workers were fully compensated for their labor. And the idea is to manage the state-owned enterprise to benefit society as a whole rather than individual capitalists. See the point? So the view supporting the socialist tradition and the collectivism mantle would come with an idea that managing to benefit society in an integrated view rather than an individual effort would be important in running the government and operating the nation. So to go deeper down, in the earlier 20th century, the socialism ideology has split it into two broader camps. First would be the communism, and the second would be social democrats. Um, First of all, the communists would have believed that the socialism could be achieved only through violent revolution and totalitarian dictatorship, such as military forces, right? Kim Jong-un of North Korea is actually running its country, the political system, in the means of communism, right? And the second group would be the social democrats, where they have committed themselves to achieving socialism by democratic means, turning their backs on violent revolution and dictatorship. See, because they're hungry, right? They are suffering of economic poverty. They want a transitional shift, moving toward free market economies where state-owned enterprises have been actually privatized. Looking at a lot of examples here of this modern-day socialism look like, such as Soviet Unions. Now it has fallen, right? In the 1970s, I believe. And its Eastern European client nations, which was what? Poland, Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic, and Hungary. They were all in this collectivist culture. Now they have made its transition. China, the Southeast Asian nations of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, right? Any of my students coming from that countries, they have made a successful transition toward free market economies. Well, they need more efforts to do it, but they are trying to turn their collectivist political system into more of a market-based one. And also African nations like Angola, Mozambique, and the Latin American nations of Cuba and Nicaragua. Okay, so there was a very big Cold War, and also I think there is one of a Cold War referring to United States and China right now, going through with the economic-based trade war. I see it more as a political system, standardization war right now, where they want, you know, the sole priority rights in controlling the worldwide economic system. So this is not a simple question. You need to glance at how the worldwide, geographic situations along the way, political situations are changing in order to create values along the way of our principles of management and the context of content, products and services that we're trying to deal with throughout, the coursework. Now let us discuss the concept of individualism, where it is opposite to the concept that I have explained earlier, the collectivism. And we have to study the reflections of a philosophy that an individual should have freedom in his or her economic and political pursuit. Contrasting to collectivism, individualism would stress the point that the interests of the individual should take precedence over the interests of the state. Think of Aristotle over Plato, and he has argued with a point that individual diversity and private ownerships are more desirable over the state-owned or state-oriented minds. And I have to give you a construction of building two central tenets of learning individualism. And the first would be an emphasis on the importance of guaranteeing individual freedom and self-expression. See, countries like United States would reinforce these ideas in their market economy system and also the government system. So we can say that they are more tended in terms of national differences, where they pinpoint out the significance of individualism, right? And also the second tenet of individualism would be the welfare of society, where it is best served by letting people pursue their own economic self-interest as opposed to some collective body. When I say collective body, I'm talking about the government dictating what is in the society's best interest. Well, this is a simple, examination where when we think about who's the richest, there are a lot of rankings here. And we see that Microsoft, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of, Amazon, Warren Buffett, one of the richest guy in the world of the Berkshire Hathaway, they have oriented their natures of wealth in the economic and political system of this individualism culture, right? Their citizenships are all United States. You see the difference? What is the central message of individualism? So therefore would be that individual economic and political freedoms are the ground rules on which a society should be based. Okay? And also in the practical terms, the individualism translates into an advocacy for democratic political systems and the free market economies. And as I have tended myself to study abroad in the United States, in the Texas A&M University and stuff, I have lived about 7 years in the United States. I come from these kind of backgrounds of individualism. So if there are basic rules, for example, when I run this course throughout this semester, I would guarantee my students, individualism, the significance of, how freedom of, the political basis and the coursework materials can be run. It's your choice to study or not to study. But, I prefer that you study, and also we are aware that there is a ground rule setting here. And if you commit to individualism and if you work hard, well, you will be compensated with a greater grades, right? I don't, give a fair grades to all of you guys. There are significant A's, B's, C's, all different. Okay, so basic understandings, the difference of individualism and collectivism can not only come from the national differences in political economy, but also significant to your classroom settings as well. Now we're almost there to finish it off with our learning objectives in trying to understand the national differences in political economy, the concept of economic system, and also the legal systems. And most importantly, we have discussed the political systems. And in detail in the earlier passages, I have given you the basic understanding of the studies that relates to what the collectivism and individualism, right? And we have two more terms to go through, which is democracy and the totalitarianism. And these two are at different ends of a political dimension, and which first democracy would reflect to a political system in which the government is by the people, exercised either directly or through elected representatives. Well, it's very simple configures, of the understanding. So, the totalitarianism is a form of government in which one person or a political party exercises absolute control over all spheres of human life and prohibits opposing political parties. So these two dimension is not independent of the collectivism or and the individualism dimension, which means that democracy and individualism can go hand in hand, as do the communist version of collectivism and the totalitarianism. Okay. However, although there could be a gray area existing, and it is possible to have that democratic state in which collectivist values predominate, and it is possible to have a totalitarian state that is hostile to collectivism and in which some degree of individualism, particularly in the economic sphere, is encouraged. See, for example, China has moved toward greater, individual freedom in the economic sphere, but the country is still ruled by a totalitarian dictatorship that constrains political freedom. Okay? So these two ends, you know, constitutes the democracy and totalitarianism, the spectrum. But you need to understand that by contextual specific settings, there could be a gray zone as well. I would have to appreciate my students in focusing on the lecture of the first model, 1. But I'm going to have to finish it off with this last slide of what is totalitarianism and configure some of my statements regarding why you need to study this along the coursework of principal management and the next generation contents here. Okay? There are basically 4 formats of totalitarianism, which is first, communist totalitarianism, right? Which is found in states where the Communist Party monopolizes power. North Korea, mainly China can be one of them. And theocratic totalitarianism are found in the states where political power is monopolized by a party and group or individual that governs according to religious principles. Okay? Tribal totalitarianism that are found in states where a political party that represents the interests of a particular tribe monopolizes the power, and the right-wing totalitarianism, which permits some individual economic freedom but restricts individual political freedom. So mainly from 1, the degree would be North Korea, to 4, China, okay? And middle existing countries you can find out, in the books. But as we have went through this political system in detail, what I want you to teach you guys is that as we try to create values in dealing with our principles of management and the next generation contents, with the same regards of the context of the contents or maybe the products and services, the approaches when we tackle down to enter into the international business ground, the characteristics of political systems are all different. And probably the contents of what that we're dealing with, can be strategically fit to specific, natures of collectivist or individual societies, but some are not, right? So how are we going to mingle with that is one significant question that we need to ask. This is coming from the basis of environmental analysis. Why do you need to know about national differences in political economy? Why do you need to understand the theoretical terminologies and the fundamental roots of these political economy per se? See? As the future business leader, right? You might have to deal with these kind of various markets. And the fundamentals, I can go deeper down into how the market-based economies or maybe the collectivist nature of the market looks like. But since we have a limited amount of time, I'm just giving you out the basis, and we have more further to deeply investigate into other sectors of, political economy, right? We have to deal with economic systems also and the legal systems and what determines the level of economic development of a nation, how it is related to our product, services, and contexts that we're trying to deal with. So you need to understand these kind of concepts first of all and try to describe, how to match the globalization issues first of all and the strategic management process that you are trying to link with your value creation of the product, services, and context of contents. and with these kind of political economy where it defines the, what is it, environmental analysis, right? So let us understand the trends and the concepts of how the national differences occur in political economy, and how we need to try to figure out the fundamentals of economic systems and legal systems as well. Okay? Well, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you guys in the Model 2.